And our next and last item tonight is a presentation slash update by Mary Harrington and Josh Artuzo on the request for qualifications, RFQ process regarding grant research firms. So I'll hand the baton to Josh and Mary.
Yes, I'm just pulling up the presentation. Yes, so tonight we just wanted to update the town board and residents on the process that we are going through to secure grants for the town of Webster. So just a little background, over time, WEDA, the Webster Economic Development Alliance, capital project design consultants that have been brought on board for projects in town, and department heads have secured grants over the last 20 plus years. Currently, the process lacks an overall organizational view to both strategize the ability to obtain more grants through collaborative, concerted efforts, and to celebrate wins. I thought it was interesting the other day when we were talking about this. Of course, Teams is eventually open. That a lot of the budget items Paul was discussing had grants associated with them. That weren't necessarily known, so definitely Sandbar Park has had a lot of grants achieved. There we go. So between August of 2022 and March of 2023, Supervisor Flaherty has engaged 7 department heads, our executive at WEDA, and auxiliary staff to discuss the strategy moving forward. They've been really interesting meetings to be involved in, and we're definitely excited to go to our next step, which is issuing a request for qualifications to consultants both locally and statewide for assistance identifying, applying for, and managing grants. And then we're also investing in training our existing staff in grant applications. We're sending the assistant to engineering and community development to a staff writing seminar in Buffalo for 2 days this month, so we're excited to see what she brings back from that. And then all the department heads are encouraged to research opportunities and communicate the findings at our monthly department head meetings. Just since the meeting that we had about a week ago when I threw this out there, I've had library and Parks and Rec throw many ideas at me for what we could do in terms of obtaining grants and ideas they had for the future.
Yeah, so this next slide kind of summarizes what the goals are of this initiative. So first and foremost, we want to take a more proactive approach towards planning, and that will be done internally amongst the various departments within the town, identifying what their needs are for now and in the future, so that they can sustain infrastructure and improve our services to the community. That could take form in a variety of different ways. Some communities have what's called a capital improvement plan, which is a 3 to 5 year lookout of what the major capital expenditures and costs would be. So it's a tool that the town could utilize to help prioritize those larger scale capital investments. Obviously, we want to identify the plethora of grant opportunities that are out there currently. There's many different programs that are geared towards a variety of topics and categories. Obviously, we have capital infrastructure projects, community and economic development. There's a lot of funding available for sustainability initiatives, operational improvements, upgrades to facilities, purchases of equipment, and others. So the overall goal is to obviously prioritize, identify a list of the town needs, identify the various funding sources, and then craft competitive grant applications that will hopefully ultimately secure funding. And then we look to formulate a plan on how we will manage these grants so that this process can be reviewed periodically. Our priorities could be reevaluated, and we would repeat that same cycle.
So an overview for the timeline for requests for qualifications for getting a consultant on board. Next Thursday at the town board meeting, we're going to do a resolution to advertise the RFQ to consultants for grant identification, application, and management services. This will be advertised in the Webster Herald the following Wednesday on March 22nd, as well as we'll be putting it in the state contract reporter on LinkedIn and other avenues that we think will get attention by consultants. On the 19th of April, we foresee this being due to the town and proposals from consultants that are interested. And then we're going to have an internal town meeting on 4/21, so it's a committee of department heads and potentially a board member to just meet and review the proposals and select top firms to present at the town board workshop on 4/27. And then by the beginning of May, we would do the resolution to award consultants term service agreements. So this would be paying by the hour for these services, and we haven't decided that it's going to just be one consultant. Depending on the services that we get, this could potentially be a few consultants that have different expertise in getting grants. So we're open to the idea that this wouldn't just be one firm that we would be contracting with.
And just, I know that it's just to clarify that it's the Thursday, May 4th is our time.
I realize that, yes.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. But that's the first regular town board meeting of May.
Correct.
And then that'll roll you into the importance of time.
Yes.
Yes, so timing is critical when talking about this particular initiative. The consolidated funding application, the CFA process, which is the state's, a variety of state agencies open a grant portal. So that process opens annually in May, and applications are generally due by the end of July. So this is a major opportunity for the town to secure funding for a variety of topics: economic development, planning initiatives, energy efficiencies, water quality, climate smart initiatives, wastewater planning, workforce development and training, just to name a few. Now, the town has been successful in receiving some of these grant funds. We've received local waterfront revitalization program grants, particularly for Sandbar Park, green infrastructure grants also from Sandbar Park. We recently received the Smart Growth Comprehensive Plan Update Grant and Water Infrastructure Improvement WIA grant for the Phase 1 of the sewer plant. So as we all know, we're hoping to break ground in fall 2023 for the new highway facility project. And Phase 2 of the sewer plant upgrades is expected to break ground in the summer of 2023. And obviously, Sandbar Park construction continues through the fall of this year.
So at this point, if there's any questions or comments from the board.
I think it's a great idea to seek to have additional grant writers out there. What department will be spearheading and accountable in this effort?
The engineering department, my department is currently working on crafting the RFQ. I guess we haven't really gone down the road of who will manage The consultants, I would guess it would be either myself or Josh, in engineering and community development. And they'd be a resource to all the other departments.
Okay. Let's see, I think, under terms of service, you had mentioned that it would be paid per hour, correct? Did I
Correct.
misunderstand you?
No, that's correct. It would be as their services are rendered, we compensate.
Would you consider, because I have talked to a lady that actually writes grants, and it is accepted practice among some grant writers that they're paid a percentage of the grants awarded. Would we not consider putting that in terms of service?
I've heard differently that they don't necessarily get paid by award, but you can get, some grants do allow you to pay for consultant services within the grant if you get awarded, so perhaps that's a way to compensate, but I think the town would have to front the money is my understanding of the process.
No, I can look into that a little deeper.
Okay.
Because quite frankly, I'd rather pay a percentage of the grant to the grant writer than billable hours. But that's
Right, that would
that's
be
just my
ideal.
opinion.
I think
Pardon?
there's, I agree that would be a nice way of doing it. I think that there's kind of like a moral code of grant writing that I've heard discussed before where they don't do that.
I heard the exact opposite. I had a 10-minute conversation with a woman that writes grants. That's where my knowledge comes from. I just look at it as an incentive also.
I would love if you got up on the podium, Matt, because I think I'm glad you're here for this.
So clearly, from a municipal perspective, it's probably in the best interest of the municipality to have a rate schedule and pay an hourly rate based on those services. Now, for grant writers that are writing for philanthropies, right, and they're obtaining funding from private agencies, it may be a more common practice, but for the town to seek a grant for $5 million and then give even 1% of that away, was that 5? Is that 50,000? Yeah, it would be 50,000. 1% of 5 million? Am I doing that right?
You did.
That's an astronomical amount of money to write a grant. Typically, in an hourly rate structure, you should be able to accommodate the development and the delivery of that grant application for less money. So
I'm glad you're up.
and I'm not trying to be argumentative.
No,
but I think
I'm
it's-
not.
I think
You write grants, you have written more grants and derived more money to this community than I can even expound on here. So my question is, Matt, you have a great deal of background and experience, and I respect everything you're saying right now. My question is, I'll use the example of the $1 million grant that you wrote for the village of Webster. How many hours do you spend on that, would you say?
That particular grant was probably somewhere between 60 and 80 hours.
What is the average hourly rate of a grant
It
writer?
would be interesting to see what we would get. I imagine a consulting firm would be billing in the $100 to probably $100 an hour. So somewhere between $6,000 and $8,000.
Okay.
So that's not as far as the expenditure of consulting fees, it's not an astronomical sum for what we would get. But granted, you would spend the money in advance, right? It's not on the if come. I think the version that you're discussing is upon award, right? So
Correct.
you're only compensated if you're successful. Whereas the other range is you could spend $8,000 and be unsuccessful this year. It's
Right.
true, it's not uncommon to be unsuccessful in writing a grant.
And we're considering multiple grant writers, correct?
Potentially.
Where's the, where are we gonna budget this money?
It's a great question. I mean, we haven't really crossed that bridge because
We're potentially,
we're on a fishing,
we're gonna spend some money, potentially.
we're on a fishing trip in a lot of ways through this process because Josh used the term plethora. I like the term, by the way, Josh. A plethora of state and federal monies has been made available in the last couple of years. I feel like I've made this speech or written this many times in the last couple of months. Regardless of how you feel politically about the federal government giving trillions of dollars available and or in our state, it's kind of irrelevant to me because our job is in Webster, 35 square miles. And if the money has been made available, whether I agree with the concept or not, it's incumbent on us to do our job for the Webster citizens today for the next 20 to 50 years to go out and get as much money at that as possible. And we just don't have right now a system, and I don't want to reiterate your presentation. We kind of make it up as we go along, and we, you know, Matt, you've been great, but through this process, and I know that Mary has said that meetings since August have been interesting to be in. I like how you described that. I think it's been educational for all of us. There's, Matt, your forte is economic development grants. And we might be expanding this out to all the bullet points you said, Mary, in here, that are outside of your scope of expertise and experience. And I want to see in that LinkedIn or whatever, what's out there? What firms are out there? Did some firm all of a sudden jump into the fray that says, hey, our bailiwick is that we will read the $1.7 trillion federal Inflation Reduction Act, which from what I've heard, there's a lot of infrastructure money in there. It doesn't sound like it the way it's branded. We haven't read it. We haven't looked at what it means. Maybe it says something in there that you can charge a percentage of the grant. So we don't have to pay unless it's awarded. To your question, Councilman Field, we don't know what we don't know. And this fishing trip is to go out and basically see what comes in, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, traditionally, our scope of understanding on this is that the research and the grant writing is done usually by like a firm like MRB, because MRB wants to get the engineering work on our highway garage. So they do it almost really as a, I don't want to say a freebie, but they want to get the core engineering work. Does that sound about right, Bill? Okay. Now, are there firms out there that they understand? Because the highway garage, the engineering work's already been awarded, and so is the construction management. Is that correct, Mary?
Correct.
So, I don't know. Is there a firm out there that says I'm not here to try to get, you know, a relationship with the town to get engineering work on future projects. My core business is to research and find grants that is a square peg in a square hole for this municipality. And that's how I make my money. Now, whether it's on billable hours, and we'll find out what they are, right? Like you said earlier, Matt, you're kind of interested to see, you said to Councilman Gale, that's an interesting question. Because the 60 or 80 hours you did for WEDA, it's part of your job. You didn't bill it out to the village, right? And I would say that,
Maybe I should have.
I will say this, I'll bet
You should have taken a percentage.
let me take a guess on this, and you know, they say it's like in court, you shouldn't ask a question you don't know the answer to. So I don't know the answer to this, but I got a good idea. The $1 million grant that Councilman Kalo refers to, that was when you were the mayor,
Right.
and it took you 60 to 80 hours, right? If it was a $10 million grant, would it have taken you 600 to 800 hours?
No.
Right. So, you said the $1 million grant, I'm not trying to jam you up, the $1 million grant, 60 to 80 hours, at an estimated $100 an hour, which we don't even know if that's the case. On this fishing trip, we'll find out, right? Was $6,000 to $8,000, which essentially on a $1 million grant was 0.6 to 0.8%. Using your example of 1% of a $5 million grant is $50,000, and that seems like an enormous amount of money to pay to a firm to help us go and apply for a $5 million grant. So,
And the flip side of that is you don't have to necessarily use 1%, you could use 0.02%.
John, you and I are more aligned, by the way.
The point I'm trying to make is there's two avenues. Is it possible to go down this avenue versus that?
You and I are in agreement, John.
And the other question I have is, because this is a great discussion we're having, I think it's a great fishing trip, we should go down this. It would benefit everybody in the long run. But one thing that I just came to mind is, are there any other municipalities out there that are currently doing this so we could potentially benchmark against?
I think you had a meeting with a firm, Mary, that did a highway garage, they got a bunch of money. That was
Yeah.
a municipality down,
No, that was a
Southern Tier.
consultant, and
Oh, okay.
that consultant does consult other municipalities on grant
Right.
opportunities, so they do that same kind of service for other municipalities.
yeah.
There's some municipalities that have a whole grant team, you know,
Right.
they have
Well-
5 staff that are there cranking out grants
Size of the town,
Yeah.
Webster.
and managing
Interestingly
them.
enough, and I, to John, your question, and I guess maybe this is maybe my world is too finite. I depend on the Monroe County supervisors at our annual or monthly
Right.
meetings and whatever. There's 19 towns, there are 10 villages. I don't ask the village mayors as much as I do the supervisors. But when it came to this grant thing, I was surprised that it was, I don't want to say my fellow supervisors were deer in headlights, but they're all like, yeah, we kind of, I don't know, we lean on whoever the engineer is that we hire for the project. So they don't have like a proactive
Right.
strategy of hiring W-2 full-time employees, a team of grant writers. And I want to make sure everybody understands something. Might be a semantic issue, but grant writing is, to me, the second step to grant researching. And because of the plethora, I'll use your word again because I love that word, Jess, we don't know what's out there. Federally, state, other funds, this and that. I'm hoping based on the wide net, not just the Webster Herald in the New York State, but LinkedIn, and trying to get it out there that we might find out there are firms that do something on researching grants that we were not privy to. And I want to see, and we should want to see what it is. And then as a board, we can discern, and you guys, I think on the 27th, plan to come with the results of who did throw their name in the hat as of the 19th of April. And I think, you know, and you gave a very nice Reader's Digest to this, but I know that you're trying to come up with some metrics, some tangible metrics to grade these submissions, because we don't know if 3 people will submit an RFQ, 3 firms, or if 40 will. We don't know. And we don't know from that whether the firms will all be, that's a firm that's a CFA helper. They're going to help us in May to July to make a CFA application to New York State. Or if we get this unbelievable amount of firms that are outside of New York State that are all saying, we're the one for the federal money. We're going to find you and help you get the federal money. I don't know. But I'm very anxious to see what we catch in that net. And when we catch it, and we talk about it on the 27th, I think some clarity will come to the budget question. Well, how much is this going to cost, you know, when we look at these things? And then Paul will, you'll be in this the whole way, obviously. You'll be able to opine on certain things, and, you know.
Yeah, I think most of it's going to be charged to the general and townwide fund, like consultant fees.
I mean, if it's an injury attorney type thing, we, hey, these firms all came in and it's kosher, legal, whatever, custom. Hey, we'll charge if we get the grant awarded to you. Other than that, we won't charge you at all. Believe me, John, I think you and I are both, that's very enticing, because it doesn't cost us a thing if they don't perform. But to your point, Matt, I don't know if the woman that John talked to is more in the philanthropic private grant thing, and that's kosher, where municipal grants, it's either not kosher or it's downright illegal. I don't know. We're gonna find out, aren't we? It's gonna be an exciting couple months.